play. And another foul on board. His third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen. Izzo's dying for a moving screen.
It's that dreaded moving screen.
Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of The Moving Screen podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn with The Athletic, here with Dylan Burkhart, UM Hoops. Friday, March 5th, the day after part one of the rivalry.
Part one of the rivalry really lived up to the podcast
sequence
name.
Back to back. Yes, it did. It did.
It was the best social advertisement for the Moving Screen Pod Twitter handle we've had in weeks. So thank you, Bo Borowski, for that. You're really doing us a solid there.
Because of this type of story I was writing, I wasn't really on Twitter at all during the game. And I checked it later in the night, and all I saw was just a flurry of activity about the podcast and the game, and was proud, frankly.
I mean, I don't think it was a particularly good name, but hey, it's living up to its billing. We're here still.
We knew what we were talking about when we made the name, right?
Yeah.
We went back and forth on all kinds of Big Ten themes when we were making this, and we really settled on Moving Screen, and it really worked out fairly well. So
something like that.
Big Michigan win, Big Ten champions. Congrats to those Wolverines. Dylan, on UM Hoops, I'm sure you have this thing covered wall to wall. What is up there, and maybe even just as importantly, what do you have coming for Sunday's game?
Yeah, so we have a like my normal game recap. Ethan wrote about the Big Ten championship and the senior class. We're gonna have 5 key plays up there from last night's game, and then we're gonna try to figure out a way to change it up a little bit, because usually we do another like preview for another game, but obviously the running it back changes that up a bit. So we're going to play around with that. I think hopefully we're going to have a film room with Gibson Piper where he's going to go through some things that happened in last night's game and show some potential adjustments for really both teams and what can go differently. So we'll have that up there, have some other good stuff, and then we're going to do this all over again on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah. How about that? And then the season's over.
Over at the regular season.
Regular season's over. I was just thinking that it's not looking like be at the NCAAs just because of access and stuff, and it's just crazy that you haven't been to a game this year, right?
Yeah, most people haven't been to a game, right? It's just a weird disconnected feeling for the whole thing.
It really is. I mean, I hand counted last night 146 people in the lower bowl. Just to give you a feel for what it was kind of like down there.
And how many of those people were related to one of the 28 players on the court? Probably 95%.
Yeah. The only ones that weren't directly related were the photographers that were down there, myself, and John Beeline and his daughter, Shauna. So everyone else pretty much had probably some kind of personal relation to everyone on the court. So
it is kind of a weird dynamic, though, if you think about it. Like Michigan, like Mike Smith and Shawnee Brown, they're going to come through and have this season, and that could be their entire season at Michigan and their career at Michigan, and never play in front of fans. Like, I guess there will be fans in the Big Ten tournament, we know, NCAA tournament, but it's a weird sort of I guess the whole year is weird, but it's one of those nights where it really stands out, I think, just how weird the whole thing has been. When you're celebrating a Big Ten championship on an empty gym, when you're doing, what I mean? It's just crazy to think about. And I thought last night, and that was more interesting than the game in a lot of respects.
Yeah, I will say I found it interesting. I sat kind of down by the Michigan bench. I put in a request with the school, and they let me sit down there to kind of do one of those like eye level type stories that's currently available on The Athletic. But watching like the last 5 minutes of the game, right? You kind of see the celebration building up, and they're doing the senior day thing where they're orchestrating all the substitutions and blah, blah, blah. And guys are coming out. And I was like, is this going to kind of feel forced? Is it going to feel like a forced celebration and blah, blah, blah? And I can say being down there, it was like, that was totally genuine. Like them rushing on the court and then playing in the confetti, and it was all real, but it was just weird. Like, I don't know if anyone on the court in that moment, right, was like felt any different about it because there weren't any fans, but like me just kind of being down there and hearing like, it's just music pumping in over top of the celebration it was just very surreal, if that's the right word.
Yeah, but if you think about it, like if you really take a step back, those celebrations, those moments are about players and coaches together. For sure. They're not interacting with the fans when they celebrate. It's not a court rush we're talking about, right? So the actual logistics of those moments, like hugging your coach when you come out of the game, like all that's real. It's just you're missing the fan part of it and like the applause and whatever else. But the celebration when you win a championship, I mean, there was probably similar number of people in the Battle for Atlantis, and they were plenty excited to celebrate that, right? It's not like you have to have a celebration in front of 100,000 people for it to be the real deal. Obviously, like Final Four, like whoever cuts down the nets on Monday night, like that'll be different, but still there'll be people there by that point. So I think it's interesting just what moments are really genuine in that sense, right? Like a senior speech is not really going to work, right? Like you're going to just talk. I thought Michigan did a good job with the videos and stuff like that to make something out of it. But like those are the moments on senior day that you don't get, especially schools that have a long kind of tradition of, we're going to do this big senior rah-rah speech that, I don't know, Michigan hasn't really done that often or that notably.
No, well, let's talk about the senior stuff kind of on the back end of this. We'll get into the game first. So for me, for like sitting down there and kind of having like a different viewpoint of it and not really like the bird's eye type thing and kind of seeing the game in terms of what one team was doing that the other team, right? Does that make sense? Like my takeaway of the game was like, there was just these two massive moments that really swung the game in a game where really Michigan State had no margin for error. And to get that foul call on Aaron Henry late in the first half and then, surrender that little extra run to Michigan before halftime. And then that swing early in the second half where Rocket Watts does not go on the ground to get that loose ball versus Hunter Dickinson, Mike Smith tips it out, and it turns into a 3-point basket. It went from, at that point, I forget what it was, but it was still relatively close. It was a huge three. So like, obviously, Michigan was a better team, right? And Michigan across the board had advantages. But it was just like those two things. It's like if Michigan State had any chance, like those things just couldn't have happened. So yeah. I'll start there and kind of let you take it from what you think.
The most important thing you said is margin for error, right? Yeah. Michigan had margin for error in this game. Michigan State, if they were going to go and win at Michigan, had to play basically a perfect game. Aaron Henry had to go the distance. Aaron Henry had to play perfect. And Aaron Henry couldn't – like Michigan, Hunter Dickinson was limited in foul trouble in the first half. And it sort of took them out of their whatever, but they didn't like fall apart and lose the connection to the game, right? Yeah. When Aaron Henry went to the bench of that second foul, that did kind of change everything, right? So that is where I kind of start, is that Michigan State, they just had to be perfect. And Michigan, like they scored 10 points in like 16 minutes, right? They just couldn't score. And eventually, if you can't score, then you can say, well, that one time they didn't get a loose ball and then Michigan made a three, or the next possession, Eli Brooks got that offensive rebound. And then but you're not going to make up enough of those plays to change the difference in the game either, right? It was, you had to figure out another way, like they just didn't have a second option to score in the half court other than isolating Aaron Henry.
Yeah. I mean, there was, that was clear. And, we said, in the preview pod, it's you got to get some threes out of Gabe Brown, right? You got to get some efficient shot making out of
really
Josh
got 3-point attempts.
They got nothing out of anybody. Yeah, exactly.
9 3-point attempts for the game, and I think 3 of them were like in the last 5 minutes from Joey Hauser when the game was already pretty much over.
Did Gabe even attempt one? I'm trying to remember. Did Gabe Brown attempt a 3-pointer in that game?
I think he got one up. He was 0 of 1 from 3, 0 of 1 from 2. But again, I think it kind of speaks to the way like Michigan State's flaws on offense fall right into Michigan's strengths on defense, right? Michigan wants you to play one-on-one and wants to take away everything else on the court, whereas Michigan State just doesn't really have a way to force you not to do that, right? They like, how are you gonna, like, Michigan will just stay home on Gabe Brown all night and not let him get a shot. And usually if you're going to do that, then someone needs to be able to create more pressure and pull that help away. And it just never happened. And I don't know what the recipe is to make that happen.
No, nor do I, because I think Hunter Dickinson on any given time, I think could go for 25 or 30 against this Michigan State team. And they, because of the foul troubles and other stuff, I think he played like just over 20 minutes or whatever. They were able to win this easily without him doing that. He had 14 points, whatever. But like when he got touches, like he could pretty much do what he wanted. And it was either that or Michigan State had to throw, 2 or 3 guys digging down on him or doing whatever, right? Anything that was straight up, he just could get whatever he wanted.
Yeah, for me, he started the game pretty quiet. Michigan State did a good job of not letting Michigan get the ball into the paint, and then he went out with an early foul. And then when he came back in, I think Kithier was on him, and he scored on 2 or 3 possessions pretty quickly in a row. And I thought those, like Michigan State was just straight single coverage at that point. That was probably midway through the first half. And then by the time the second half came around, they started throwing more bodies at him. And then that's when stuff starts to fall apart for you defensively against Michigan, where if you're going to dig on him, and they did force turnovers, right? He had 6 turnovers, I think, which is what will happen with Hunter in games when teams are good at bringing different kind of pressure looks at him. And so give Michigan State credit for that, but you just open yourself up to everything else at that point. And once you're scrambling to put more attention on the post, you're losing your guy on box outs and everything else, and it just all kind of crumbles downhill.
Michigan's defense, I thought a lot of this was just Michigan State's just not having the offense to hang against Michigan's defense as a whole. But specifically, if you're going to talk about anything, the job Franz did on Aaron Henry was pretty high level.
Especially in the second half.
Yeah. What did you think there?
So Henry, I think, had 6 baskets. 2, I think Franz was his primary defender. So Franz was pretty much, I thought his length really affected him. I thought Michigan, like I wrote in my preview about Henry and how he shoots 64% from 6 to 8 feet, which is basically when he jump stops right outside of the restricted area. Michigan did a great job of keeping him either like just slightly further than that, where he's a little less comfortable. I think that's really the key to defending him. I also thought Franz did a great job. Like Franz is really handsy. He's really good at swiping down and deflecting the ball. And Henry struggled at times, I think. And again, because Michigan could throw a little more attention on him. And it's just like, you can't just ask Aaron Henry. Aaron Henry looked like the real deal, and he didn't play bad, I wouldn't say. I agree. He was asked to do way too much. So right. I don't know that you can say like, man, I just like he needs a little help. He needs someone else to do something. And there was
it got to the point where they weren't even doing anything. They were just basically putting him in isolation, right?
Yeah.
That was it.
So here's my question. If you're Michigan State, you watch that game, what do you try to do different on Sunday?
I mean, not going 0 for 9 on threes, not only taking 9 threes, you got to figure out a way to get something. I mean, that's just ridiculous. Michigan's defense is good. It's not that good. Like, how do you not get something? And I'm not really sure. I mean, Michigan was locked in. You can tell that they had themselves some defensive film sessions, I think, coming off of that Illinois game. And those guys were not messing around on that end of the court. But like that said, I mean, this Michigan State team did beat Ohio State and Illinois like a week ago. Like they generated enough offense to do that. You should be able to get some looks against Michigan.
Yeah, for me, I think I don't know. Like Michigan State isn't winning games because its offense is driving the show, right? Like it's very much about the defense. So, like I really think Michigan, if they get to 1.05, 1.1 points per possession, is going to be really hard for Michigan State to win. So I think you probably have to start with, can we just double down on, like, there's probably some things you can look back at that first half and say, okay, that worked. We can do that. Maybe we made him uncomfortable. Like Franz Wagner was just absent from the game for the first 15 minutes. Basically, he only took one shot. I think it was the first possession of the game. So I think you have to probably start, if you're going to pull the upset, is how do we make this? We need it. Like they lost, they just those few possessions, they lost control. Like it's all about game control, right? If you can just make it this every possession, everyone's going to run 25 seconds of clock. You're going to try to get a shot up. If you can keep it in that kind of game, but then it was the second chances that help break that, I think. Because if you're going to play that way, you have to be perfect on the glass. You have to be perfect in transition. And that's a lot to ask. There
were those swings like that, just these moments that you're just like, that just can't happen. There was Aaron Henry missed that reverse layup where he was just kind of right under the basket. They come down, Michigan missed the shot, but Brandon Johns comes flying in and gets a tip in. Like that's a 4-point swing that at that moment in a low scoring game might as well have been like a 6 or 8-0 run. Because that's how it felt. Because you're just like, Michigan State's just not going to be able to score at a pace that you can give up any like immediate cushions like that.
One thing I will say, I loved what Michigan State ran against Michigan zone. You know how they like changed it up to match up like halfway through the possession kind of, and every time Michigan State was able to ISO Aaron Henry on Mike Smith, that was good coaching. That was like every time, if you go watch every zone possession. So I would leave the zone maybe in the clipboard in the second time around if you're Michigan, because that was great. Like you could tell that was just exactly what they wanted to do, and they got it almost every time.
Were they running zone in like the flow of the game, or was it mainly out of the timeouts like usual?
It was usually after timeouts, but I think maybe one or two other possessions. Sometimes when they bring the little pressure and they fall into zone,
right?
Which I don't know. I feel like Michigan gets too cute with that sometimes. But
I don't mind it at the timeouts, but at this point, anyone who scouts them, it's coming. Like you should, if you're playing Michigan, you should be drawing up an offensive play against the zone in that timeout every single time.
Yeah. And that's what Michigan State did, and they ran it very well. So
Michigan State's pretty well coached. So yeah, they cracked that case exactly.
I just have a hard time finding what the answer, like for Michigan State to what's been Michigan State's best offensive performance, and what happened. Like how is it going to happen? I'm not sure. It's like Aaron Henry goes bonanza and scores 30, but it's there's not a lot of upside when you just can't. You don't have anyone getting up 3-point shots, right?
Their best offensive performances have been when, Langford goes 2 for 10 on twos last night, and like some of them were makeable shots that he just missed.
We talk about the play when he literally stole the outlet pass and then took a step back.
Oh yeah.
16-foot jumper.
That was horrible. That was really, and Izzo did not like that one. That was the hands out. Why are you doing that? It made no sense. They were outnumbered, weren't they?
They missed, and then Michigan got the rebound, and then he just stole the outlet pass. He could have just reset it, but he was also wide open. He could have gone to the basket, but instead he kind of just took a step back baseline jumper because, it's just for good times.
He also had one, he also had one on the elbow that was open and a normal shot and a good clean look, and he just flat out missed it. And those on the nights that Michigan State does actually score the ball a little bit, he makes those shots.
But still, so your upside of the offense is that Josh Langford is going to make 16-footers all night, enough to keep up, right? So I think there's got to be. I'm not saying it's a great plan. I'm saying this is what it's been all year, though. I don't know.
What do they do? Were they going post touches for Julius Marble?
Rocket had a couple moments getting downhill.
Rocket got downhill a couple times. That's true.
More than he has, and then he had some mistakes. And some bad sequences also, which is, I guess, kind of the whole thing this year. So, Michigan State's problem is there's no one, and I think Izzo mentioned this in the press conference, if you put your best player at point guard with Aaron Henry just running the team, who's he supposed to pass to, right? The only guy who can create any kind of leverage or pressure on the rim to kick out is also the guy who you would want to kick out and let him attack, right? So it's sort of this back and forth where I don't know what the answer is. I think it's just you need to keep the game in East Lansing in the low 60s and then just make plays late. That has to be the recipe.
I would play more Marcus Bingham in the next game. I would play probably less Joey Hauser and more Malik Hall.
I mean, Hauser barely played. He played 20 minutes, but
Played 20 minutes, and
he was in the game when in the Hoiberg time. So he played 20 minutes, but he didn't really play that much time when I feel like he wasn't on the court that much when the game was on the line. He was late in the first half, and Brandon Johns beat him baseline, which I mean, that was a great minutes for Brandon Johns, but man, that is not a good look.
So I think that's why those were the impressions that are in my mind, right? It's like these moments that I just remember, like he might not have played that much, but I remember when he was on the court, like thinking to myself, like these are not good minutes for Joey Hauser. So if it's a matchup or if it's whatever, this is not a good spot for him. But
also, like, I get that he's a bad defensive player.
Why did Malik Hall only play 10 minutes?
Because he got 2 fouls in the first minute.
Okay.
If you put Joey Hauser at the 5, and I know he can't defend, but so if Michigan put Austin Davis out there, put Hauser at the 5, and just you can get him open threes. That's something, right? Like, do that. Like, I know they did that late.
But then Michigan would just counter with Johns. I don't think that they would stick to that lineup.
Okay, well, it's something. It gives, like, he can make jump shots. I don't know. I like that better than a Julius Marble post touch or like Josh Langford. If you can get him the ball on the move to catch and shoot, that's one thing, like curling and like those kind of free throw line jumpers you talked about. But he's not going to break Michigan's defense down off the bounce like he was trying to do at times. And I don't think it's his fault, but that's just not his game, right? So I don't like going to that. I'd much rather just pick and pop with Hauser over and over and hope you find a 3 of 4 night from 3, and then maybe you got a different game.
Yeah. Why was Henry in the game, like, in the last 10 minutes?
In the last 10 minutes?
Yeah, when it got to 20, I'm like, get him out of the game. He's your only thing you got.
I mean, Hoiberg went in the game with 6 minutes left, so I think he sat the last 6, right? That's a lot.
I thought he should have sat the last 10.
It was a nice the final score was closer than whatever you would say the game would have been, right?
The score was so weird. When that game ended, I didn't know if Michigan won by 12 or 25.
Yeah, because they were up 28.
Right.
But
and when they were up 28, like it was close relatively before. Like that first half it was a game. You know?
Yeah, the whole
And I was like, oh, okay, interesting. It's not going to, because I thought there was a chance of it being a Michigan runaway coming into the night. And, they hanging around, and with 3 minutes left in the first half, it's like, man, Michigan State, all the credit in the world. They're going to get this thing to halftime and have a game.
But this has been Michigan all year. Like Michigan's blowouts aren't blowouts from the opening tip, right? It's been that 4 minutes and a half, 4 minutes to start the half when a game goes from 7 to 20, and then it's kind of just over. And that's been the recipe for all these home blowouts that Michigan's had this year. And even the home blowout that Michigan had, the home blowout lost to Illinois, they did the same thing. So I think that's where a game swings. And when you have a defense like Michigan, Michigan, that was 0.76 points per possession, was their best defensive game of the year on per possession stats. But again, like, I agree with you. Some of that has to just go to, it's not their best defensive performance. I think they've had better defensive performances against better teams, but that definitely is a jarring stat. And I was like, the telling stat, that was the 3rd worst Michigan State performance of the year on offense. So it wasn't even Michigan State's worst, right. Which kind of explains where we're at with this whole Michigan State offense. Do you think, so I guess if Michigan State missed an opportunity, what was wrong with Michigan in that first, 8 to 10 minutes, would you say? What did Michigan State do to keep them out of there?
There were so many fouls. There was no flow to the game. I thought Michigan was trying to get any level of easy baskets, and it couldn't kind of get going because anytime that, between the turnovers and between the fouls, it was just so mucked up that there weren't even enough possessions to build a lead. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I would love to go back and count how many back and forth possessions there were in that half without a whistle. Mm-hmm. Right. It was just, whether it's a dead ball, turnover or whatever, right. It was just, It was
and like
it was a
sit
hard
down
watch.
there, like you could like feel the frustration, right? Like those two moving screens, everyone's kind of looking at each other like, well, shit, what are we allowed to do if this is how the game's going to be called?
Yeah. Do you think that was any bit of nerves on Michigan's part? Like pressure of, oh, we need to do this to win the Big Ten. We know we're supposed to win. And were they tight and then they loosened up as the game went on? Or do you just think it was just the jagged nature of the game?
I think you could. I think they were maybe a little tight. I mean,
Especially with the
loss.
way that Illinois game went.
Yeah.
And it felt like they finally saw the ball go in a little bit there right at the start of the second half, and then they just started throwing things up and seemed a lot more confident. Kind of have that. It's easy. Right. Everyone's more confident when you're up 20 points, obviously. But
well, yeah. But then, like, you guys kind of saw, like, guys were just taking shots a different way. Like, they had that one sequence where Mike Smith and Dickinson were in the ball screen, and Dickinson kind of yo-yoed the defender and then threw the pass over the top, and Dickinson got the dunk. Next possession down, ball screen. This time Dickinson dives, and Smith takes a dribble step back and cans a three that, like, he shot with all the confidence in the world, right? Like, probably for the last three halves before that, and nothing was happening that smoothly for sure. And also they were going against in the second half, they were also going against a Michigan State team that kind of looked broken.
Yeah, that I do wonder about. For me, it's been a frustrating trend from a Michigan perspective is they get obsessed with playing through the post in the first half. And I think it's because maybe they can't quite figure out what ball screen reads are there. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look, but I feel like the sets they run in the second half, and maybe like we started to talk about this with Beeline, but I feel like they ran better stuff when they were going toward their own bench, right?
We're going to talk to Beeline about this?
No, I feel like under Beeline, that was a thing that we talked about in the past, where if
I was really confused. Okay.
Like Michigan would run better offense, I've always felt like in the second half because you're going to your bench where it's a lot easier to coach, I would say, on offense, especially in a full gym. But so maybe that's part of it, and maybe that's kind of how they got there. But I felt like they ran a lot of effective ball screen sets and just more action in general in the second half, and the offense looked a lot better where it just kind of stagnates around this, we need to establish the post in the first half. And it's just a balance that's hard to strike, I think, of, yeah, you have a great post scorer in Hunter Dickinson, but you don't have to give him the ball every time and you can still run your stuff. Yeah,
like I understand wanting to get a few early touches, primarily because you need to see how the defense is playing it, right? Mm-hmm. And then you're going to start with your game plan for if they're doubling, if they're not doubling, but you need to have an idea. But yeah, like, so 2 or 3 of your first 5 or 6 possessions, okay, I get that. But you're right. Sometimes it does seem like they're going there even if it's not there.
Or even,
when you have, there's options all over the place. Like you got multiple pros on the court, and you got multiple guys averaging double figures, blah, blah, blah. No, I tend to agree. And you brought that up. I think you started bringing that up more and more kind of as conference play has gone on. And like, I've definitely see what you mean over the course of the year.
And I just wonder, like, you can't go 14 minutes without Franz Wagner taking a shot, or 12 minutes or whatever. Like, Michigan's at its best when he's engaged and getting downhill, and he can't just drift out of the game like that in a game against a better team in a single elimination spot. So I think finding the way to sort of hit those levers and get him a chance to, maybe it's even like in a bench shift, right? Like for some reason, I feel like Franz Wagner's never the playmaker when Austin Davis is in the game. Maybe like they need to get their pick and roll game together. So I don't know. I just look at that as something to work on, because you can't just go flat for 3 or 4 minutes in the first half kind of every game. And it feels like that's the rut they're in these last few games.
Yeah. And like a lot of, you correct me if I'm wrong here, because it might just be what's in my head, but it did seem like a lot of what Franz got was just him just kind of taking shots, like as opposed to like things that were being dialed up for him.
They were putting him in the ball screen, and Michigan State was going under, and he was just shooting threes. So I think that's a couple of his threes in the second half. That was what happened. Obviously, there was the one that was the broken play that came back out to him, but I did think.
How deep was that, by the way? Because I was sitting baseline. It looked like he was way out there on that.
Yeah, maybe that's his trick to rediscovering his shooting stroke. But it's funny. We talked about, remember the start of the season, can Franz Wagner ever make a three? He's up to like 40% in Big Ten games. So
right. I think we said that people shouldn't be worried about that, but
I think we did, but people wanted to know. So,
can we talk about the next game?
Yeah.
I feel like the theory is that the game means more to Michigan State. It's their senior day. It's their, possibly season on the line, whatever. NCAA tournament hopes very much kind of hanging in the balance. For Michigan, though, I hear people being like, oh, they're not going to care. It's not a big game for them anymore. I kind of feel like the fact that they got the Big Ten championship off their back, they bounced back from the Illinois game. I almost think I think they could be better in the second game because they're going to be playing even looser because who gives a shit? They're just going to be running around having fun, I think, just looking to kind of ball out and mess with Michigan State a little bit would be my guess. And you got an older team that's going to want to smack their rival, right? I don't think this works out well for Michigan State.
Well, I don't Michigan State could have a level of desperation that maybe is hard to match because that's how life is on the bubble. On the other hand, we talked about how Michigan seemed a little tight in the first half. They're going to be ready to go for a kill shot. They're not going to be worrying. I agree with you. They're going to be did you see Juwan got asked? Did you see his answer when someone asked him about people asking if the
I did not
second game doesn't matter? He said like shit real quick, and then he had to catch himself, and then he said I almost got out of character for a second, and then so he was not all about was not throwing that game away. I'll tell you that. So no. I think they're going to look at it as an opportunity and a low pressure, high upside opportunity.
I completely agree.
I don't know though. That's different than playing for your life though, right? They're two different attitudes, but it's a slippery slope for Michigan State, right? The margin for error thing we talked about is still
if
there.
They were evenly matched, then I'd definitely say, oh yeah, the desperate team wins. But they're not evenly matched at all.
They're not.
It's desperation versus, better talent. I don't know. So, lineup wise, I mentioned a couple changes that I would make if I were Michigan State. Do you have anything rotation wise or anything like that?
Just Aaron Henry can't get 2 fouls in the first half. He can't get 3 fouls in the second half. That's the starting point. I think I like Hauser at the 5 for more. I think you have to just try that. I know he's a bad defender and this and the rest, but that gives you something on offense. I think Watts was able to get downhill on Michigan sometimes. So here's the thing we know about Michigan. They're going to stay home everywhere, which means if you can just beat your guy, there's a chance to get all the way to the rim and finish. Maybe easier than against other teams, right? But you're not going to get to the rim and kick out for an open 3. So Watts should fit that style of game, especially if he's matched up with Mike Smith. I think he fits that role better than Josh Langford. And instead, it was Josh Langford trying to create his own offense against Eli, which I don't think he's going to win that battle that often, despite having a couple inches on him.
I'll be very curious for the Rocket Watts role in this game. He started last night. He did have some good moments. He had some kind of, go get him buckets that he just kind of made for himself, which when your team scores 50 points, that's certainly valuable.
Had some go get him charges also.
He also got, and then that's like you said it earlier, right? Like there were the both sides that we've been talking about all year and, got sat for the last 17 minutes. Izzo was, asked about him not going for that loose ball and that whole sequence. And, his frustration was pretty straightforward, I think he told Larry Lage, like, you've known me 30 years. Like, you saw what happened, write what you want. So, yeah, that tells you everything you need to know.
The problem is, all right.
Because here's the thing. Are you still on Rocket? Or are you changing the point?
No.
Okay.
Go ahead. Keep going.
I was going to say, this is the last regular season game. Right? And then it's postseason time. And, the what happens with Rocket Watts question is very much on the horizon here, and I'm really curious to see how these last few games go.
But here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
You can't pick Aaron Henry, who's one person on Michigan State that could get you 20 points. We're going to do the old school, how do you get to 70 points, Brendan Quinn style game analysis. If you need one guy, who is it? Like, so it doesn't have to be every night, but one guy who in one night could go and get you 20.
I'd say the top. I'm even trying to think of who has done it this year. I mean, Hauser can get you 20.
Yeah, Hauser.
At the guard position, though?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably Rocket, and
we might have to change it to 14. Who can get you 14?
Maybe if Gabe puts up 8 threes, 9 threes, like he should.
Gabe's not going to get 8 3-point attempts against Michigan, though. That's just how they play. So you need that guy who can go and get you a bucket. And I mean, AJ Hogarth had a good drive and finish, I think, at one point.
That one late in the first half, that was a big play because it looked like Michigan was about to break it open right there.
But I don't so you can do that 8 times in a game? I don't think so.
Well, that would be unlikely, yes.
But Rocket, you could see in a game where everything's going right, he is able to do that over and over again. But it's just everything else around Rocket is just not in a good spot. And getting benched is not really going to lead to playing more against the same team 3 days later. So that's a tough answer to throw out there as a possibility.
Right. And I don't have it off the top of my head how he did defensively in the game other than, what were probably mistakes. Like in just the regular flow of defense, how was he matching up? I imagine better than Hogarth was.
Yeah, and then, he got pulled from the game then, and then the game went completely off the rails. So his defensive numbers probably look okay. Maybe he was the secret. He just didn't want to get down there for that loose ball. Man, it's really hard to watch a game like that was that one-sided in the second half and then just say, all right, they're going to run it back 3 days later and it's going to be completely different. But I also think it's far more likely to be a closer game. I just think that just that's the way basketball works and the flow of it all, right? So I do think there's some of that at play. And there's a chance these teams could play again next Friday, right? So a week from today.
I want to talk a little bit about the seniors.
All right.
So it was really, I thought, telling, being down there and watching them go through that ceremony. Like, these guys and Juwan, man, that is it is as genuine and real as anything that I've seen. Those guys were. It was quite the little love fest out there, and anyone that thinks that he's not hard on these guys, or this idea of players coach and blah blah blah, he's hard on dudes. He rides Mike Smith sometimes in games. But there is, I feel like there's such a level of mutual respect, though, that, watching them go through those exchanges when they were calling each guy out and they were greeted by him at their frame jersey, that was, it was very different than the old, handshake, pose for the picture. There was a lot of emotion on that court.
Yeah, it's also telling how many different situations all these guys came from to end up with Juwan Howard and how he seems to have such a strong relationship with all of them, right? Guys who he came in mid part of their careers, guys who he recruited later to transfer in, walk-ons. It seemed like he really has connected with the whole team in a genuine, meaningful way. I don't know. It was definitely telling. I thought you were much closer to the action there, though, so that's interesting to hear.
I'm still curious. There's some guys that I'm I don't think there's any chance that they are even considering an extra year.
Oh baby, get into it. What do you want? Ship, what do you got for the people? Let's hear.
Why wouldn't you talk about it? It's a real conversation.
It's the number one question that I feel like has been asked since
really?
the second game of the season.
Oh man, I haven't been on your message board, so I don't know.
People want to know. What
the people are. I don't like a guy like Livers, right? No. Eli Brooks. No. The 2 grad transfers are my question. I don't see it for Mike Smith. He's old. He's really old. And he also started every game this year. He's been the guy. He got what he came to Michigan for. I do wonder about Shawnee Brown because he would have a large role on next year's team. He would have a starting key role on next year's team. And I think it's something that like he needs. This is not me saying like I know any information, not by any means, but just for the sake of conversation, like if anyone needs to think about it, I feel like it would be him potentially.
Yeah. So does that extra year of eligibility work any differently? Because he's not a graduate student, right? So he would just be a graduate student next year because he's not a grad transfer. He's the 2 grad transfers.
That's my understanding.
I get it. I don't really see as much opportunity for him if he came back, though. I will like Mike Smith's the guy who, if he came back, it would be a shoe-in. Like Mike Smith coming back would be the most impactful of those seniors
for the team. Yes.
Yeah, but Mike Smith has done more. Yeah, like so individually, you could have more to prove and whatever else. But
like what? Yeah, what does Mike Smith need to come back to Michigan to do? Right. I mean.
Yeah,
he got what he needed.
He would be. Would you agree that he would be the guy you would want the most for Michigan's roster next year?
Oh yeah, you want a point guard, no doubt.
Right.
1,000%.
Just making sure.
Yeah. But I'm in terms of the individuals who are making the decision, right? Not the team picking choosing who you get to keep. If you're the team, you take them all. Shit, why not? Give me Isaiah Livers while you're at it.
Do you like if Shawnee Brown came back? Would you see him in a role where he'd play like 30 minutes a game though, like easily?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, you're losing Livers.
You're losing a lot of guys. Yeah.
You're probably losing Wagner. I mean, you're talking about a 5th-year senior who plays defense, is tough as shit, rebounds, gives you all this stuff. Like
he would. I just think it's hard when you have all these other bodies coming in too, though, and you're not like you're going to look and you're going to say you're going to play the McDonald's All-American at 3, right? So you got to see like, well,
you know, freshmen too.
Yeah.
And Sean D, you can play him at 3 different spots.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. I find Michigan's situation is particularly hard, I feel like, for a lot of those decisions because they have such a highly touted class coming in. Mm-hmm. And like, do you want to stick around and be the guy left over while all the attention's on the new class? You know what I mean? It's a balance you have to, expectations wise, like if you're going to convince Sean D to come back, what if all these other guys are better and need to play more, and does that cause an issue, right? And he played that kind of secondary role perfectly this year, but he's not going to want to buy into that for another season, I wouldn't think. But so that's something to watch out for. Do you get a sense like across the country, do you think this is going to be common for guys to come back or fairly uncommon?
I don't think it's going to be a massive thing. No. I think you'll see it though, for sure. I think it'd be more relevant if guys could actually change schools.
Like, you know, yeah, you could 5th year up basically.
You're right. Exactly. But no, across the country, you'll certainly see it. But yeah, like I don't see whole teams coming back or anything like that and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I was just thinking about it watching, I was thinking about all this watching the senior ceremony. I'm looking at the staff too, right? Like Howard Isley, he's going to get a BC interview. I've already heard of, there's kind of feelers out there on who would be his potential veteran assistant, right? That Martelli, Juwan role type deal for the first time head coach, right? Like those conversations are already kind of happening. So, I think he gets an interview as soon as the season ends. A guy like Phil, if something opens up, if, Michigan goes to the Final Four and a team, Martelli's going to get some calls, right? I mean, that's just going to be natural. What if there's a fit? I don't know, but he's a name and this program's going to have some juice behind it. Same thing with Sadie Washington.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he's going to get some head coach looks. He already did last year and turned it down. But, you're talking about a guy who's been – Sadie Washington's been on that bench for a shit ton of wins, man. 2 Final Fours. It's he's due, and he's in his 40s. Like he probably needs to be looking to do that at some point. So, yeah, like there's a chance that this is a very different looking group the next time that they're all at Chrysler together.
And I think that's all healthy. Like
no
people
doubt.
always lose their minds over staff attrition, but when you lose coaches to better jobs, I think that's a very good thing for your program, and it's just gonna make it easy to hire new coaches. And I mean, Juwan would push them out the door, I would think, to take all those opportunities in a heartbeat. So,
yeah, and like his network of people, like,
here's my question: say you lose two coaches on Michigan's bench, right. Would you go? What direction do you think Michigan would look to hire? Would it be kind of the NBA Howard Isley offensive guy? Would it be a recruiter? Would it be a kind of college lifer? There's so many different ways that could go, and I think the equation looks different now. Chris Hunter.
I would like to see Chris Hunter get strong consideration at this point. I mean, this dude has put his time in. So I think that he'd have to get an interview, and he gives you both of it. He gives you institutional knowledge, and he gives you NBA experience. Chris Hunter played in the NBA. I would think he's got the chops.
With how I think it must have been Phil talking about hiring John Simmons as video coordinator this year. Mm-hmm. Basically, he was in the family. There was no discussion or decision to be made. And that kind of logic would bode well for Chris Hunter getting an assistant coaching gig, I would say, pretty quickly if there's attrition. So I agree with that for sure.
I would think you would want to bring in a guard coach of some kind, someone coaching guards.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder, it's just such a funny, because I do feel like for Howard Isley to be as, like, he never speaks hardly, right?
Yeah, I was going to say he could go and it would be the Howard Isley, we hardly knew you,
But I think you better be pretty good at something if you're that quiet as a college basketball coach. I assume that he probably, they've talked about him involved with the offense, and I think you probably have to give a lot of credit for a lot of the how effective a lot of Michigan's offensive stuff has been. So I think he would make sense for Boston College, but man, he better hire some people who are going to go out and get him some kids, because he doesn't seem to be real big on recruiting, generally speaking.
Yeah, and I think we can only really say that because we haven't heard of, commitments directly attached to him where it's like, oh, this was the Howard Isley deal, right? So I think you're right on that, at least in terms of perception. His kind of public persona is really interesting in the fact that he is kind of quiet and people don't really know that much about him and things like that. But resume wise, he was an assistant coach for 3 different NBA teams. I think he basically had a similar span of time. It was probably like 6 years or so as Juwan, as an NBA assistant. Now he's got college experience. Resume's there. He's obviously a big time Boston College, kind of great. The competition for that job is going to be interesting. I don't know what direction they're going to go. Like, Tommy Amaker's right there. That makes a lot of sense. John Becker makes sense. I'm forgetting some names. I just had conversations about this, but
I feel like if you're Howard Isley, why would you go coach at Michigan as an assistant?
Exactly.
Without really thinking you had a good chance of getting this job. So hopefully he gets it, because I think that's probably been his play for a while here. Because I think most people would rather be an assistant coach in the NBA.
I hope he gets it just because I want to see the introductory press conference. So, and that had to be cool for him last night. Guy who's from Detroit, right? He didn't go to Michigan, but he's from Detroit, grew up watching Michigan, has been friends with Juwan since high school. So, there's a lot of attention on Juwan, but that had to be pretty damn cool for Howard Isley. It's cool for Phil Martelli, first conference championship regular season for him since 2005.
Was that that wasn't the great times back in the day?
The Jameer year? No,
yeah, that was like
04.
04.
So the next year they lost Jameer Nelson and Delonte West, and they had a guy named Pat Carroll who was just one of the best shooters I've ever seen. And it was kind of the leftovers from that 04 team. They went 3-8 in non-league play and went 14-2 in the A10. Won the championship, barely missed the tournament, Imagine going 14-2 in the A10 and not getting a bid, by the way. But
imagine going 3-8.
Well, yeah. And then that team went to the NIT championship, actually. Lost to somebody. I don't know.
04.
I would have been no, 05. They went to the NIT
05,
championship.
because I was going to say Michigan was making those deep NIT runs in 04 and 06, I think. So
No, 04 was the Elite Eight. 05, they won the A10 and then went to the NIT finals. Who did they lose to? I don't know.
we're just going to do a whole pod this summer. You can just recount old St. Joe's seasons.
That's
what the people
05.
need.
I was at St. Joe's. I was probably very intoxicated for whoever that NIT championship game was. I know I was at the Garden for it. I can tell you that for a fact.
So the last podcast, I was informed that I let you off the hook without making a pick. You had me give a pick, and you never gave a pick. So you need to give a pick for Sunday's game now. We're putting you on.
I didn't give a pick in that game?
No,
I did.
You're shifty a little bit here. You got out of it.
I think I said on someone's show yesterday or the day before that I thought Michigan was going to kind of roll in this one.
Someone's show is not the Moving Screen podcast. Maybe you got to stop going rambling on radio hits left and right. Save the good stuff for the people.
I will. I'm going to take Michigan by double digits in this game.
I'll go with Michigan by 8.
Okay.
I feel like, what do you think the spread will be? We actually hit the spread pretty much close on the dot in the last game. I feel like the spread is Michigan by 11 on KenPom.
That's exactly what I was going to say. 11 sounds right to me.
But we said the last game you said 11 or 12 was too high.
Yeah. Listen, man.
All right. Well, that'll do it then, I guess.
That'll do it, man. We'll be back
next week for a little Big Ten tourney pod.
Monday morning before I get on a plane, right?
You're going to Sawgrass?
I'm going to Sawgrass.
We're going to do Monday. Should we do, oh, you're going to be doing golf shit all week? Because I was going to say, all right, we'll try to do on Monday. You're killing me, man.
No, we can do it a different day.
We'll figure it out.
Maybe even Sunday night.
Sunday night might be the move.
Maybe that's the move. All right.
And then
all right. Well, I'm glad that everyone got to hear us go through this negotiation. That's good content right there. All right, my man. It was great, as always, talking with you about Michigan State. For the listeners out there, please subscribe to Hoops. Please subscribe to The Athletic. And if you would be so kind as to leave us a review in the iTunes store, it is a great help, apparently. So be well and tip your bartenders and servers.